Welcome to the lecture. From our 5-corner model, in this series of videos we're going to focus specifically on the physical corner. We're going to start off with a task. The question I'd like you to consider is, what components of fitness are important for football? Can you come up with a list of the key components of fitness that are important for football? This task should take you approximately 5 minutes. Feel free to discuss in small groups or make notes individually. Hopefully you've had a chance to come up with a list of the key components of fitness that are important for football. Now what I'd like you to do is identify from that list what are the priorities for young players. From the original list you've identified, can you now select the key priorities for young players? This task should take you approximately 5 minutes, and feel free to discuss in small groups or make notes individually. Hopefully, on completing the task of selecting the priority areas that fall within the physical corner when working with young players, you've identified the following 4 areas: agility, balance, coordination and speed, which are also known as the ABCs. With agility being the ability to change direction at maximal speed without the loss of balance. Balance being the maintenance of a player's equilibrium under force. Coordination being a player's ability to move a series of joints, limbs, parts of the body or muscles effectively. And speed, a player's ability to react to a stimulus and generate force quickly. When looking at the physical development of young players, it's important to have an awareness of the overarching structures and pathways that player is taking part in. So now we're going to look at long-term player development, which when you look through the literature will be referred to as long-term athlete development. What I'd like you to do is define or describe long-term player development. This task should take you approximately 2 or 3 minutes. Feel free to discuss in small groups or make notes individually. Hopefully you've had a chance to complete the task related to defining or describing long-term player development. The long-term player development approach was designed to help prepare players reach elite levels, but it's equally valid for healthy, lifelong participation in sport. The long-term player development model maps out an individual's development across the key stages related to their age, with each stage having particular requirements. It's also important to bear in mind that some athletes may move into the elite end of sport at a late stage, having played and experienced other sports. The long-term player development model approach suggests that playing other sports is part of the 10-year development program. Looking further into the long-term approach and the 10-year rule, Bloom in 1985 and Erickson et al. In 1993 have been quoted as saying, "Scientific research has concluded that it takes 8 to 12 years of training for a talented athlete to reach elite levels." And this is further supported by Herbert Simon, that is quoted as saying, "It takes 10 years of extensive training to excel in anything." And I think within this body of literature and what happens out in industry, there are conflicting approaches to these particular models. You have a lot of research and literature that suggests a player taking part in a variety of sports with that multi-sport approach and then specialising later in their development is the best method to produce elite athletes. while football clubs currently have extended the 10-year rule into approximately a 12 to 15-year rule, with young players getting identified as early as 4 years of age, and with the recent changes, the under-23s being part of their continued development. And also football clubs are known to be using the early specialisation approach, whereby an individual player specialises in a specific sport from a young age. And these are very much conflicting approaches in the current climate, within research and within industry. When looking at these approaches in journals or books, you'll see them referred to as the multi-sports approach and the early specialisation approach. Looking into the stages of the long-term player development model, which you can see on screen, we're just going to talk through each of the stages. So within the physical literacy category, you have the active start, the fundamental, and the learning to train stage. Then further, the excellence category, in which training to train, training to compete, and training to win fall into. And also the lifelong physical activity, where active for life falls into. From the graphic on screen that's been modified from Barley and Hamilton 2004, you can now see how each of the long-term player development model stages slot into an individual's chronological age, with the fundamental stage being from 5 to 11 years of age, the training to train stage being from 10 to 15 years of age, the training to compete stage being from 13 to 19 years of age, and the training to win stage being 18 plus. And you'll notice each of these stages actually overlap, and this is some consideration for the fact that each individual will develop at different rates. Now we're going to look specifically at the fundamental stage of development, while also having a brief look at the other stages of development. It's important for us as coaches, when working with the fundamental stage age group from 5 years old through to 11 years old, that we stick to some key considerations. And as we've discussed previously, the key physical considerations at this age are the ABCs: agility, balance, coordination, and speed. Also for us as coaches working predominantly with the fundamental stage, players aged 5 to 11 years old, as well as the physical considerations being the ABCs, it's important to also have considerations for the other of the 5 corners. Technically, we want to focus on their technical competencies, with this age being critical for their motor development and their development of fundamental movement skills. Within our sessions, we want to provide fun-related activities with a problem-solving environment. And within this stage of development, tactically, we want to give them the basic understanding and principles of space and allow players to play in a variety of positions within overloaded multi-directional games or small-sided games. From a psychological and social point of view, within this stage of development, we want to integrate young players from working individually to having exposure to working in small groups, while also setting a no-fear environment where players are given the opportunity to express themselves. It's also important for us as coaches to be aware of the future stages of development that follow the fundamental stage. Specifically the training to train stage, which caters for players from 11 to 14 years of age. These players are looking at refining and perfecting their technical skills, integrating decision-making skills, completing complex skills under which they are challenged, and starting to gain exposure to individual roles on the pitch. Perhaps at this stage tactically, they're starting to form the abilities of a defender or midfield player or forward. Then at the later part of this stage, into the following stage, they can specifically focus on an individual role. These players are starting to gain exposure of the physical components of fitness, and also starting to integrate psychological and social skills into their development, while also being aware of their biological age. During this stage of development, players are often going through critical stages of growth and maturation.